Welcome to episode 52 of The Liz McMullen Show. My guest this evening is the most excellent author, Rachel Spangler. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Terribly, terribly exciting. I met you at GCLS this year.
Yes, that was good fun.
Oh, definitely good fun. I sat down with some awesome BSB authors and your sweet son.
He's a charmer.
He really is, and he is mini you, totally.
Yeah, there's no doubt where he came from.
You know, the same thing is true for me and my parents, because you can definitely tell that I'm a McMullen. There's no denying it. I'm fruit of their loins, so to speak. So, you gave a special presentation at GCLS this year. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I had the most tremendous honor of presenting the Trailblazer Award this year to Ms. Mary Jane Meeker, who is, we've been blessed to have some great foremothers in lesbian fiction, but she's one of the big ones. She is basically the mother of lesbian pulp fiction.
What book did she write that is such a seminal piece?
She wrote Spring Fire. It's credited as being the first lesbian pulp novel.
Sweet. Yeah, I remember I really enjoyed watching the video and hearing the little details, like the fact that it had to have an unhappy ending.
Yeah, her editors kind of said that, that was the change that had to be made, is that it had to have an unhappy ending because... not because they had any sort of personal bias. They didn't. Dick Carroll was very liberal, but that it couldn't be sent through the postal service if it was seen as promoting homosexuality. It would not be allowed to be sent in the USPS.
One of the interesting things that I've learned from another interview with another most excellent trailblazer, Lee Lynch, was that after reading that book and subsequent books, she was determined to not just write her own stories, but also to write happy endings. Yeah,
Lee is amazing. I can't say enough about Lee Lynch, what she's done for our genre and what she's done for me personally as an author. I sing her praises every chance I get. But you really see the evolution from Mary Jane Meeker, who wrote the first pulp novel, to Anne Bannon, who let Bebo Brinker live, and not insanely happy endings, but let them sort of find their peace. On to Lee Lynch, who just has been able to write our stories with a candor that, like I said, to this day I'm in such awe of.
She's so articulate, and she's incredibly, incredibly gracious and kind, and, definitely does us a service. And one of the things when I was baby like myself and reading literature is I found The Well of Loneliness terribly sad and melancholy. And I was like, I don't want to read this kind of stuff. Ugh.
Yeah, and when you think that was in a way happy for its day, because at least it painted us sympathetically. Before that, lesbians had been nothing but predators. Mm-hmm. But to think that The Well of Loneliness was sort of the best you could hope for in that day, we've come a long way. Absolutely,
we've come a long way. And the other thing that I like, Lynn Ames has a book, I think it's called Eyes on the Stars, and it talks about the WASP air women and what they experienced. And books like that in Stone Butch Blues gives us a great and horrifying image of what it was like to go through the decades where not only were you in the closet, but it was truly dangerous for you to even live secretly as gay.
Yeah, I particularly like Eyes on the Stars because it sort of paints that big sweeping picture, and that you get some real darkness there, but you also get your happy ending, many generations in the making. So yeah, I really enjoyed that sort of retrospective on how far we've come since World War II.
Yes, and speaking of how far folks can come, I want to dovetail into a discussion on your novel, Spanish Heart.
Yeah, that's something different than what we've been talking about, no?
Well, you would think so, but the reason why I wanted to segue into that is because the lead character is lost and knows that she's a lesbian and knows what she wants or how she wants to appear, even though other than coming out to her friends who were really supportive, she wasn't a part of a queer community, and she was desperately trying to find herself. And I imagine for those reading the pulp fiction or A Well of Loneliness or things along those lines, were searching for themselves and an image of themselves. And that was really a big part of the evolution of the book in Spanish Heart.
Yeah, I think that there's something universal there too, in that she's not coming out as gay. She came out, without the sort of problems that we associate with coming out. Her parents were supportive. She's got some friends who don't necessarily understand, but who love her. Mm-hmm. But that sense of trying to find a community, of feeling like you're alone in that identity, I guess is, something that Lee Lynch talked about, is, feeling like you're the only person who ever felt this way. And while Ren knows that's not true, she's never met those people. She lives in a very, very small town. And I think that that's something that we still have to deal with, is that, finding your identity, finding that sort of mirror for yourself. Even when you're in a supportive community, it's not the same as being part of a gay community.
One of the things that touched me in one point in the book, when she's at a lesbian bar, is that she'd never held somebody in her arms, never felt the small of someone's back, or being held in general. And she was searching for experience and also trying to find herself. And in the beginning of the book, it seemed like she wanted so many things, but didn't know how to go about getting them. And in the absence, she had a lot of bluster.
Yeah, that's, in a lot of ways, that's a standard coming of age sort of experience, right? Mm-hmm. You know that there's these things out there. You know that they're ahead of you. And straight kids have a somewhat different experience in that, every movie they see, every high school dance, everything from their teen magazines to their friends around them are dealing with these same things. So there is that bumbling, there is that awkwardness, but at least you've got the role models. For gay kids like Ren, my main character, you don't have those images. You have these sort of the things like she says, like, oh, I've seen the L word, mm-hmm. And where those of us in the lesbian community are like, oi, the L word, right? Mm-hmm. No one lives like that. But if that's the only image you've got in middle America, it's kind of hard to figure out how you're supposed to behave.
Can you give my listeners a little bit of background on Spanish Heart?
Yeah, Spanish Heart follows the main character, Ren. She is on a trip to Spain with a group from her community college. She is in between community college and university, and she's feeling very stuck. A lot of her friends have gone off to the university. They know what they want to do with their lives. They know what they want to study. Many of them are starting long-term relationships. But Ren has sort of been in a holding pattern, and she's feeling like time is running out. She feels like she's missing out on some of the best experiences of her life because she doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. So she's gone to Spain in this summer before she goes away, and she's kind of put a timeline on herself to say, by the end of this trip, you need to have some things figured out. This is your chance to get the experience you've always wanted. You're out of the small town. You're out of the Midwest. No more excuses. And she puts a lot of pressure on herself to become something that she thinks she wants. But along the way, she might find out that she had the wrong idea.
Yeah, one of the things that struck me was how hungry she was, and how she was searching. She figured, like, okay, I need to get to this neighborhood, to this bar, and I got to get my first experience behind me, because I don't want to be a virgin loser going in college and stuff like that. And I was lucky that when I figured out that I liked women, I was going to a women's college in a very liberal environment. So I had tons of role models and options and different incarnations of what a lesbian is. And so it was interesting to see through the eyes of something that I had never experienced myself.
Yeah, I think that's sort of been a common response to the book, is that some readers figured out who they were very early on and had this sort of certainty about that. And so I don't know if they identify with the book very much or not, but I hear from a group of women of all ages who said, oh, I either came out later in life and I felt like I was behind, or I came out really early in life to the point that people didn't really take me seriously. So it's been interesting to hear sort of women on both ends of the spectrum sort of talk about that uncertainty of coming out in a time where you weren't with a peer group, or you weren't in a space where you had freedom to sort of play around. Mm-hmm. And it's hard, right? I mean, I think that's one of the things that as our youth come out younger and younger, while they're still at home, it's a lot harder to sort of figure out your place in a community if you're still, living at your parents'.
Mm-hmm. Living at your parents is also one thing, and also being in a small town. I was happy that she had such supported friends, and what it turns out, it's not so much just her striving to be comfortable in her own skin. She has a lot to learn about intimate relationships in general, and that includes letting her friends be close to her.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the longest time, she's been pretending that she's got a lot more figured out than she does. And whenever we keep up a charade of any kind, we have to sort of push away genuine interactions. I mean, genuine interactions are always going to be risky to someone who's not living a genuine life, or living in their authentic identity. And so, yeah, she's behind. She's never had those close friendships. She's never had a close romantic relationship. She's 20 years old and she's never dated. There's a lot of learning to do there, that her friends have had those opportunities and she hasn't yet.
And she's on this incredible level of a mission and lots of pressure for a very short trip to Spain. And it seems like she needed to break through those walls before any of the changes that she wanted could happen.
Yeah, I mean, and she fights hard. She's a stubborn kid. I mean, she's got some amazing opportunities right in front of her, but like so many of us at that age, or so many of us even into adulthood, you don't necessarily see what's in front of you if you're looking for something else.
I actually, oddly enough, have a little bit in common with Ren, that when I was 20 was when I did 6 weeks backpacking around Europe.
What a great experience.
It was so awesome. The reason why I bring it up in context with Ren is that even though I had a lot of role models and I had, a wellspring of experiences and confidence that she did not have, sometimes the confidence gets you in trouble.
Yes.
Or just in situations that you're not expecting. And there's one that sticks out in my head, and it's kind of funny, but it was terrifying at the time. I was on a train. I was leaving Barcelona, going to Lisbon, Portugal. And I was just going to be staying in Lisbon for a day and then taking a trip south to go, to be on on the beaches and stuff like that, which was supposed to be awesome in party town and whatnot. And on the train, I met two women who were Swedish, and they both had white blonde hair. And were very feminine. And apparently that was a little problematic when we were in Lisbon, because somebody having light hair is very rare. And we had people like following us, trying to talk to us. Anybody from a grease monkey to somebody in a three-piece suit, all of them were giving us a lot of attention for that reason. And then that evening, closer to the time when we were supposed to take our train south, we realized that this guy was following us, and it was disconcerting. So we decided to get on this ferry to try and get away from him. But unfortunately, the fee for the ferry is so low that he was able to follow us. And so we're trying to figure out what the hell we're going to do. And in the meantime, we're dressed like turtles, because you have your backpack, and usually you have your day pack in front of you. Not exactly the most mobile, but the second we got back to the shore, we barely waited for the conveyor to go down, and we were running, and I remember thinking to myself, with the slapping of my backpack on my back, I'm like, we have to get there before the last train to Madrid goes out. And, we were able to get a taxi, and we run inside, and we're like panting and trying to get our tickets, and we're just shaving it close enough. And then we got on the train, relaxed a little bit, and then got a little drunk because we were so freaked out. But I swear to God, if you had seen like the three of us running so weighed down by like our backpacks and our front packs, and it was such this like awful experience, and I was just like, but the reason why I bring these kind of stories up is like you feel invincible. Like some folks, when you're a teenager, you feel like nothing bad can ever happen to you, and that's a level of naivety that I will never have again. But you put yourself in situations that are questionable, and then you're like, how the hell are you going to get out? And I won't tell exactly what happened to Ren, but in her pursuit for finding experience, she got herself in quite an alarming situation.
Yeah. She, that book has been out for a little while, so I'm like you said, I'm not going to go into complete detail, but, her quest is to, get some sexual experience, and she almost gets more than she wants. And getting what she wants and realizing that it's not what she wants. And the other main character, the romantic lead, Lena, sort of busts in at a moment that hopefully everyone reading it thinks, oh my God, thank God she showed up, because this was about to turn into something horrible. Mm-hmm. And Rin doesn't realize it until she sees the look on Lena's face. Mm-hmm. And when she sees her fear reflected, that's when she realizes, like you said, that sort of, you think you're invincible, you think you can get through anything, but it's only that sort of seeing it either with some perspective of time or seeing it from someone else's viewpoint that you realize, oh my God, how close did I just come to doing something horrible?
And what was interesting was the evolution of that particular experience, because she's like, oh, I'm finally dancing with someone. Things start progressing, and even though it's not exactly what she had in mind, it's going in the direction that she's hoping for, which is, getting some experience, but it's not really unfolding the way it does. And even though she wants to toss away her virginity on a one-night stand of sorts, this is not what she had in mind. And then Lena bursts in and rescues her drunk ass. And then she has what you mentioned in the book, a come to Jesus moment, where which I just love that phrase. And, Lena shoves her in the shower, in an ice cold shower. And she's bumbling and trying to figure out around. She's like, ask for help. And she's like, help. No, that was a demand. That wasn't what I was looking at. And Lena leaves the room until Ren's like sucks it up and actually, asks for help.
Yeah, I wrote those scenes were emotionally exhausting, and I had sort of, like many of the readers, had grown weary of Ren's stubbornness, and so I knew that Lena was going to shove her into the shower. I had that sort of moment in my head, but I had no idea what was going to come after that until I started writing. I had no idea what Lena was going to say to her, and it just came pouring out. I wrote that scene very, very quickly, and it was Lena sort of unloading on her in a way that I think was very satisfying for me. I've heard from readers that was a very satisfying moment for them too. And it was only after the fact that I realized that ultimately it's a very satisfying moment for Ren too, though she doesn't see it that way at first, because it gives her the freedom to start seeing things differently. Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a good pivoting point because Lena, through little glimmers here and there that I'm sure were not accidental on your part, she's trying to very subtly, without like grabbing her by the harness, so to speak, leading a horse to water, and giving her like little advice or whatnot to have the change that she can sense Ren wants to have. But Ren's too stubborn to, actually go for, the brass ring. And then she has this moment where, after that awful experience and she's been rescued and the adrenaline is out of her system and she's in a freezing cold shower and she's too drunk to right herself. I think that was a good rock bottom, so to speak. And also I liked seeing Lena lose her cool and her temper and just pretty much saying, cut the shits, grow up,
Yeah, she says that she's there to become an adult in a lot of ways, or she thinks of herself as an adult, but she's trying to get the experience to go with it. But it's really only after that moment that she starts to come of age. She starts to really reach her age and her potential. And Lena, it was funny, I was talking to my editor, Linda Sandoval, throughout this whole process, and she said, you've written a coming-of-age tale with a traditional Spangler romance on the back half of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really a good way to put it, because after that it does really sort of step more into the wheelhouse of, the romances that I'm used to writing after that point. But I think Ren had to grow up in order to have her romance. She had to reach through the first half of that book. She had to sort of hit her rock bottom before she was capable of seeing her true love story there.
Yeah, I was wondering what was going to happen, because one of the things I find unique about Spanish Heart is how introspective it is, and there's not a lot of action going on. There's a lot of internal dialogue. There's her subtly starting to open up, and what I thought was great was when I finally figured out why it was titled the way it was, and it's all wrapped up in her finding herself while in Spain.
Yeah, and I think obviously she wouldn't have found Lena back home, but I think she would have never had the freedom under the pressures of American culture and being so steeped in that. She's a quintessential American in the first half of the book, in some good ways and in some bad ways too. But it's only when she really gets immersed in the Spanish culture and the Spanish way of thinking about life that she's able to see things on a much broader level.
When I was reading the book, I thought about how I was as a traveler at her age, and I think because I was raised by hippies as well, but had a little bit of a different experience, I was very open to the different cultures that I was in. If I was in, like, if I visited Paris a lot, and oftentimes they would try and speak in English, you know, so as to include me, and I would ask them to speak French because I could approximate. I know Spanish myself, and you can kind of get a sense for it. I was like, I want to hear different languages. I want to experience different cultures, and I don't want them to feel like they constantly have to be striving to speak English in order to make me feel included. And I had a URL pass, which was a great way to just kind of go with the flow. And basically, you have 10 days of travel built into it. But let's say you go to a city, and for example, if I didn't like Lisbon, I could get back on a train if it was still on the same 24-hour part of the day and go someplace else. There was a lot of flexibility built into there, and because I'm kind of easygoing, you know, no matter what happened, I'd like go with the flow. Whereas a friend of mine was visiting with me, Carmen. We went to college together, and I started part of my backpacking with her. And I was visiting a friend in Amsterdam, and he lived north of Amsterdam, but Carmen was concerned about the train schedule, and I said, we don't have to worry about the train schedule. It goes all night, and Johan told me how to take it, and I'm familiar with it. It's fine. And she was still in the car kind of stressing and needing something concrete and a particular exact time when we were leaving. And in order to feel comfortable, she needed structure. So that was like an interesting juxtaposition. You actually had a trip to Spain where your teacher, as in the book, was she the same illness or?
No, it was different. She actually started hemorrhaging. We'd been there all of about 3 hours, and so we were a small group from a very, very tiny town in central Illinois. Mm-hmm. I had been to Europe the year before with my grandparents, but I believe I was the only one on the trip who had traveled internationally before. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have a lot of experience. I remember two of my classmates being mystified by the revolving door at the hotel in Barcelona. I mean, these are good, educated people, but we hadn't traveled a lot. And all of a sudden, we're in Spain, and our chaperone is gone. We actually had a substitute teacher who was with us, but she didn't know any of us. She'd never traveled internationally. She didn't speak a word of Spanish. She had thought that she was along for the ride. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, the only person on our group that spoke Spanish was down for the count. She was hospitalized, and she stayed there for the rest of the trip while we went on without her.
Holy crap!
Yeah. We had a tour guide who was not at all like Lena, not nearly as attentive. She was nice, but she took us from city to city, and she would say, hey, here's Madrid. There's a palace. There's a big plaza. You might want to check those out, and I'll see you in 2 days.
Oh, crap! I remember for me, because I was backpacking around Europe eventually, and sometimes you end up seeing the same people at different points in your trip, even accidentally, because we always go in similar circles. And I remembered by the time I got to Spain, I was so sick of churches and museums. Because, I was in Paris and Amsterdam, Berlin, Munich, Florence. And so by the time I got to Spain, I was like, I don't want to see another. It's like, I don't want to go to another church. I don't want to see another museum. And when I was in Madrid, I spent the majority of my time that I was there in Parque de Retiro, which showed up in your book.
Yeah, that's they were pretty tired by that point in the trip too. I don't know if this made it into the book or not, but I remember realizing in Madrid that the Europeans' definition of in walking distance is very different from the Americans' definition of within walking distance. That the European walking distance means literally the distance you could walk before you die.
So I'm guessing the town you grew up in didn't involve a lot of walking.
No. I mean, like, you could walk from one side of the town to the other and not have gone 2 miles.
I come from a small town too, but Hoboken is right across the Hudson River from Manhattan. And, I just got so used to walking. Like, I could walk from the Village all the way up to Central Park. I mean, not without breaking a sweat, but it didn't affect me. And my friend from Texas, Adrian Blagg, was visiting me. And I said, well, why don't you come along with me on my walk? I do this walk. It's great. I get to see the New York skyline, blah, blah, blah. But the walk was about 6 or 7 miles. And I'm used to it. And it goes, up and down, hilly-like area, obviously covered with asphalt and whatnot. But I was so used to it and like, la, 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 la. And we get to the halfway point and she's like, you are so much more fierce than I am. And I said, yeah, but if I tried to bike how far you bike, I would pass out.
Yeah, we had no such experience. We had no city nearby. I like to say that my hometown is about an hour from any form of civilization. We're about an hour from St. Louis and about an hour from Springfield. So you really had to go through a great distance of cornfield before you hit anything where you would have to walk.
Oh, man. One of the other things that popped up in your book, which just made me happy, was The Spanish Pearl, which is by Catherine Friend, and happens to be one of my all-time favorite lesbian fiction books. And I actually started reading it again, and what was interesting was in the beginning you see Zaragoza from the standpoint of what it is now, including a suspension bridge and lots of apartments and, the clogged, awful air from cars and whatnot. And then when she flips back into time, there aren't all these buildings. The air is crisp. The sky is gorgeous. But yeah, I like that idea. I almost wish I could go back in time, but just as much as Kate didn't want to be stuck there, I wouldn't want to be stuck there either. Yeah,
I love, there's 2 books in that series, the Spanish series, from Catherine Friend, and I love them both. I love Catherine. I keep trying to talk her into taking a lesbian literary tour of Spain with me. Mm-hmm. I have this wild idea that someday she and I will board a bus, much like Lena and Ren, and we will go to the places that appear in both of our books. And Catherine can handle the historical, and I can handle the modern. And it's mostly an excuse to give Catherine and I an excuse to go back to Spain. But in this fantasy, we take readers with us, and we have a great time.
Oh my God, that sounds fantastic. I'm sure folks listening to this episode is like, me, I sign up.
Well, yeah, if there's a groundswell of support of people who want to go on this trip, maybe I can convince Catherine to come along with me.
It's just so, another cool element of the Spanish Pearl is all the mishmash of history that didn't make a whole lot of sense to Kate, but her partner was a professor of history. And so she had constantly been trying to drill things into her girlfriend's head with not much luck. And then Kate, up close and personal, gets to see how confusing it is, where there are some Christians, mercenary, who are fighting with the Moors, and the way that the country was broken up. And it was just so interesting because she was confused as all get out. But as the book continues to go, she gets a bigger picture of what's going on there, and also figures out that she wouldn't mind staying.
Yeah, the Spanish history is, it's something that most Americans can't even begin to wrap their heads around. I love Spain. I've studied Spain quite a bit, and I still can't wrap my head around some of it. I went initially in the first draft of Spanish Heart. I had like these page-long summaries of like the cultural and military history of Toledo, and it all had to be slashed and burned because it's not a history text, and Ren wouldn't have sat through a 3-hour lecture on the history of the Moors. But it's fascinating to me, and I love that aspect. And I think one of the main things that Lena says is that you just need to realize that Spain has been a center of culture and religion for over 1,000 years. You know, that you had Moors and Catholics and Jews and secular Romans living and working together from the time that we think history begins. You know, and they were all there, and they were all thriving. And I think that that's one of the things that makes Spain really great, is that it's got that mixed, varied history.
Yeah, and for those of, like, I'm a history buff myself, and ancient Rome had running water. They had the Via Appia, and they had, water that would come up from the hills and down into Rome, with baths and all these elaborate, gorgeous places to have your daily ablutions. And the same was true in Zaragoza in the 11th century. It wasn't Spain yet, but that particular environment. And the Moors were incredibly inventive and civilized, and were able to kind of coexist with many different cultures. And the same thing is true, and I'm jumping to a different part of Europe. In Bosnia and Sarajevo, there were also that same kind of burgeoning, exciting mixture of cultures, until folks were trying to cleanse anything that they didn't agree with. And it seems, for me, Christian history, including going back to Spain, and how they tried to basically purge anything that wasn't like themselves.
Yeah, I mean, that was sort of the beginning of the end for Spain's glory period in arts and literature and music, is when you start to cut out differences.
Mm-hmm. Like, you know, one of the concerns in I think it was the second book, Crown of Valencia, was there was a character who was a Jew, and he was concerned, where can I live and not be in trouble? Like, where should I go? Because Kate knew a little bit more about history than he did. And I won't give any spoilers as to who he is, because, you know, there's a lot of different things going on with that doesn't get revealed until a certain point in the Spanish Pearl. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave Spain. I could hang out there forever.
Me too.
So we are going to leave Spain to a completely not Spain place.
Georgia.
Which has its own fabulous, rich history. And we're going to talk about Southern Belle Barbie. Southern Living Barbie. Your latest book is called Does She Love You?
Yes, that is a big jump from Spanish.
That's just like a huge, like, I couldn't think of a bridge, Rachel.
No, there's really not. Those are the two most different things I have ever written.
So tell us a little bit about the story itself.
So in Does She Love You, I have three main characters for the first time in my life, my career. And the first one is Annabelle. She is married to the woman of her dreams. They've been married for 13 years, and they have this sort of picture-perfect life. She is a housewife. Her partner, Nick, is a very successful businesswoman. Everything is great for them. And then you have Davis, who is a hip, young Atlanta urban woman. She does things her own way, and she's a little jaded from her experiences with love and loss. But things are finally starting to look up for her. She has just met the woman that she thinks could be the one she could start to let herself trust again. She's starting to open up. The only problem is that woman is Nick, Annabelle's wife.
I know.
So both of these very different women are in love with the same woman, and she is playing them both.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah.
One of the things that could have been easy, which is not what you did, would be to paint Nick as this total unrepentant, womanizing villain.
Yeah, that was the initial plan.
But you get a better idea of what's going on in her head. And one thing that is true for Davis, Annabelle, and Nick is they're not quite living the life that they want to live.
Yeah, there's, nothing is quite what meets the eye. And I have to give credit where it's due. KG McGregor is very much to blame for Nick getting her own point of view in the novel, because initially it was just going to be alternating points of view from Annabelle and Davis. But a couple years ago in GCLS Orlando, KG McGregor gave a keynote speech that was really wonderful, emotional, challenging, asking writers to not take the easy road out, to really dig deeper onto issues that maybe weren't so pretty and weren't so easy to explain. And she said there will be some people who don't like that, who don't want to read it, and that's fine. But that doesn't mean that the story shouldn't be told. And so that's where I really dove into Nick. That's where I said, okay, the big question when we see situations like this, and they're out there, we've all seen them, is you want to know why. Dear God, why would you do that? So that's a question I really tried to answer, other than saying, well, she's pure evil.
The source of all evil.
Yes, and if we're going to say that she is a human being, a dynamic human being, what makes you do something like this?
In the beginning, you get introduced to Annabelle, and she is Southern Living Barbie, but not in an obnoxious way. Like, she's just gracious and kind, and a part of her is very fulfilled in her role as a housewife, but you see early on that there are a little bit of gaps in happiness for her. She feels kind of alone because Nick travels a lot. So oftentimes she probably would like, and she mentioned, for Nick to work a job where, she didn't have to spend so much time alone. And the other thing is she gave up her career. She was a first grade teacher. She gave up her career, and Nick wanted to provide for her, and she kind of went with that. She also thought that this was going to parlay into having a family, but many years later, it's not.
Yeah, and I think that's common, right? That women, no woman I know thinks, oh, well, hey, I'm going to get in a relationship and become a doormat. Like, these are things that happen very slowly over time. Life sends you things that you weren't expecting. Dreams get diverted or deferred. And suddenly, one day you wake up and you realize you're not quite sure how you got to where you are.
I think also for her, she was kind of swept up in Nick's mission. And Nick grew up, I believe, in a trailer park.
Yes.
And with a father who was deadbeat and was really like a mess. And her mother was out of the picture, and she was trying her best to not be what people expected of white trash. And she had all these ideas of what her life would be like, and including being a provider for her, living in the beautiful home and, providing for her wife so she can, buy whatever she wants and not deal with lawn care or gardening, even though in reality, Annabelle loves cooking and she would love to take care of these kinds of things. And whenever she tries to kind of stick up for that, Nick suppresses it with her dream. But it turns out when you have some of the introspection for Nick when she's away on business and she does meet Davis, is that she's not particularly happy with her life either. That she feels also that she's on autopilot, and Davis shakes her up, and that's one of the reasons why she, against her better judgment, pursued Davis.
Yeah, and I think, I guess that is, I say that these books couldn't be more different, but I think that's probably one common thread that all of these characters have with Ren, is that they're chasing something that on the surface looks really wonderful. This dream that they've been after for a long time, and they've either gotten it or gotten really close to it, only to find out that maybe it wasn't quite as fulfilling as they thought it would be. And what do you do at that point in your life when you've been chasing something for so long? You're so close, or you're even holding it in your hand, and you find out this is not at all what you thought, or maybe it is a little bit what you thought, but it's still not filling that gap that you were trying to fill with it. And what do you do? How do three very different people react in those situations?
And Nick, one part of her personality, because even though she's cheated on her wife more than once, she doesn't have that totally smarmy womanizer thing where she doesn't have any care, any feelings for those who are around her. And one of the things that was interesting when she was trying to have it all, so to speak, she was trying to keep, Annabelle happy and keep Davis happy. And she would say to herself, well, I wouldn't want to disillusion or do something that would upset Davis because she's just starting to trust somebody, and I don't want to do that to her, so I'm kind of stuck because if she finds out this, blah, blah, blah. And then she's like, well, maybe I can keep everybody happy by being everything for everybody, and it kind of catches up with her.
Yeah, I think she is selfish. She is selfish, but not in the way that most people think of an adulterer as being selfish, right? She's not just completely out for a cheap thrill. She's out to be a hero. And so she, by playing that role for both of these women, she gets to be worthy of something, or she doesn't actually get to be worthy, but she gets to feel worthy. For someone who grew up feeling like less than nothing, to be considered a hero by two amazing women, it's more than about the sex. It's more than about the thrill. She really is sort of fulfilling herself by being what these two women want, or at least pretending to be what these two women want, to sort of create the illusion that she's creating happiness.
Because it seems like, I'm going to spend more time with this person or that person. And at first, Davis thought it was cool that she turned her phone off and focused her complete and total attention on her, until she started to get little inklings that this wasn't altogether right. At the same time, Davis was, so wrapped up in the passion and falling for Nick that she was willing to fool herself as to what was going on. And for Annabelle, she was happy to be getting more attention because when Nick was playing both sides of the fence, she was giving more attention to Belle, and she was more invigorated because of the wildness that Davis introduced to her. And it seemed, Belle's like, well, this is different and new and kind of exciting, although something's off. And then things kind of crash around them. In a really fantastic, awful way.
Yeah, that's ultimately what's got to happen, right? Because no one can keep that up forever. It's not real. None of it was real. And, so it's got to come down. And that's ultimately the message of the book, right? Is how do these three women deal with the aftermath of a betrayal like that. And I hope that they deal with it in ways that are realistic, that are hopeful, that'll ultimately be uplifting, but they have to slog through a bunch of stuff to get there. And,
each of them wanted change in their life in the beginning of the book, and they all get change. But this wasn't exactly what they thought that they were getting themselves into, and it's alarming and disorienting, and eventually they all learn something important about themselves, something beyond if they were coasting or continuing to live the life that they led before the apocalypse. They all end up being in a better place by the end of the book.
Yeah, and they say that at one point, not to give too much away, but that they sure wish there was another way to get there. It would have been nice if there could have been a nicer, more pleasant way to get to where they are in the end. But, hopefully it's worth it in the end.
Yeah, we won't be doing any spoilers because that sucks, and I hate when people do that to me. But what I will say is I read a lot, obviously for the show, and even before I started having the show, I'm a very avid, voracious reader. So what I enjoy is little shockers, where something does not go in a predictable direction. It does not go the way that you think it is. Like, for example, not this book, but, the blustering, insensitive surgeon eventually, finds herself broken down and falling in love with, the journalist. So you kind of know that that's the way it's going to happen. You don't know how it's going to happen, but in the end of the book, they're going to have some sort of happily ever after. And, wear your seatbelts for this book is all I have to say. Wear your seatbelts, make sure to check behind you before you switch lanes. It's definitely going to be an unusual and bumpy ride.
Yeah, it doesn't fit the mold in a lot of ways, which I hope is a good thing.
It is. You shocked me and continue to do so throughout the novel. And I don't remember if I mentioned this before we started recording or after, but I'm kind of used to a 3-act structure where you kind of get introduced to somebody in the beginning, and then something happens, like a door of no return, that our protagonist can't go back to the life that they were leading. Then there's like the middle point, which can last, a long time or briefly. And they're trying to find resolution. And then, there's a climax of sorts. And then you get to the end and everything gets sewed up and tied up. And this book totally flouts that tradition.
It is different. It was definitely a challenge to write emotionally and technically.
Yeah, I can see one of the things that you said is that you've had mentors who've given you advice as to how to write certain characters or experience plots and try new things. And when you break from a more traditional plot structure with somewhat linear, go from one point to the next to something that completely tears that up, then what do you do when there's no blueprint?
You cry a lot.
Are you a pantster or a planner? I forgot to ask.
I am a pantster. I wouldn't say I'm completely slammed against the far end of the pantser spectrum, but I'm pretty far over there. I knew basically what was going to happen in this book. I knew, I knew who was going to cheat on who. I knew that they were going to get caught. I knew how they were vaguely going to get redeemed. But beyond that, it was an adventure. It really was. It was emotional. I took a full year to write this book. It was draining at parts. It was uplifting at parts. It was confusing at parts. I was also, when I started writing this book, I was teaching an introduction to romance writing. So it was exciting to be writing while I was teaching writing. My students were wonderful and energetic, and one of the bargains I made with them the first day of class was that I would not ask them to do anything I was not doing for my own novel. And so when they wrote character sketches, I wrote a character sketch for this book. When they did setting mock-ups, I did a setting mock-up for this book. And when they did a sex scene, I wrote a sex scene. And I posted mine on the same web board that they posted theirs. Mm-hmm. And they critiqued mine and gave me feedback the same way I did with their writing. So it was...
a brave new world.
Yeah, it was. It was really fun to sort of be a student of writing again at a time that I was really trying something very different.
One of the things that I've noticed with your writing, and this not always the story with Bold Strokes authors, but often is, I've seen you evolve a lot as a writer, and I've read all of your stuff. And what's interesting to me is to see through each book the learning that you're doing. And I think in order to be an effective, dynamic writer, and also to keep your fans engaged and interested, taking risks and to continue to be a student of writing as you write is probably the best way of going about having a career in writing rather than knocking out a book or two.
Yeah, and I wrote my first book in college. I was an undergrad. I was just playing around in the back of a geology class, It was purely for my own sport, my own entertainment. And so I did have a long way to come from that to say that I am now a full-time writer who studies craft, who wants to have a career and not just a hobby. Mm-hmm. That has been a long evolution, and I hope that I'm getting better with each book. That's sort of the goal. I want to keep getting better. Like I said, I look at people like Lee Lynch, the career that she's had, the things that she's given to the community, and the things that the community have given back to her. I hope that someday I have a career like that to look back on. But I know it's not just going to happen on its own. That's something that's going to take constant study, constant growth. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not knocking folks who have only written one or two novels. There's something that is a little separate from this, but has to do with the writer's experience when it comes to the market in an environment where there is pirating. When people basically take your ebook and make it available to other people for free. And it affects all authors because many authors are not offered the opportunity to continue writing books because the sales aren't there. But if you took into account the numbers where people were not buying their work but were interested and voracious to consume and experience their work, then they would be able to continue on what they were doing. And making a career out of writing, especially writing genre fiction, is not easy. And the majority of the authors out there, it's their second, third, or fourth job, not their primary source of income.
Yeah, it's certainly not something I could be doing if I didn't have a wife with a great job and a medical plan. Mm-hmm. This is, like you said, it's a part-time living at best, and we need every sale we can get. I mean, every time someone pirates a work or steals it, that's what it is. They're stealing. Mm-hmm. Pirates are cool. These guys are stealing. Mm-hmm. They're theft. They're thieves, and they're taking money out of my wallet. They're taking money away from my kid. I don't mean to make some cheap ploy using my kid there, but I've got a young son. We are living on a tight budget. Mm-hmm. He's growing quickly, and every sale that gets taken illegally is that's more time that I have to spend doing things other than writing. Mm-hmm. I have to spend time fighting the people who are pirating, but I also have to find another way to make that money back. And it usually involves me babysitting or taking work outside of the home or teaching another class. And that's time that I'm not writing. Mm-hmm.
It's a very challenging life, the writer's life. In addition to writing, and writing takes time, editing takes time, a lot goes into work. Many times there's a lot goes into research, and if you really thought about how much time and energy goes into the book and then look at, how much it actually costs to buy it, it's like a pittance. And there are lots of people who continue to work as writers because they believe in it, but that also involves doing readings, doing interviews like this, going to conferences, and it's a very high labor, low yield product, and you have to show your support and respect, and show your authors and the small publishing houses and whatnot that you appreciate them. I mean, we're not talking about a mint. If you're buying an ebook, it's like $10, and you gotta buy that book and not do it the easy way.
Yeah, I mean, I get that money's tight. I really do. Like I said, we're living on a budget. We live in a very small house in a very small town. We have one car. We walk where we need to go a lot of the time. But those are the choices that we make. Those are our priorities. That's the values that we want to hand down to our son. Mm-hmm. And so I encourage people to do the same thing. Look at your priorities. If you really want a book, then you'll find a way to pay for it. And if you don't want it bad enough to pay for it, then you probably don't want it bad enough to justify stealing it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and one of the things that is a little irritating is sometimes folks valorize people breaking the rules, people hacking. You can see it in movies, you can read it in books, where it's almost glorified in the same way that the yo-ho pirate's life for me, the historical idea of pirating. But for me, I see buying a book is showing your support of an author, of a genre, of our stories, because honestly, I like to see myself in stories. I like to see my people, and I like to see all the variety and hard work and so many different genres and very, very talented and giving and generous women. And it seems like a small price to pay to, actually fork over for a book and show your respect.
I hope so. I hope that it's worth it. I hope that at the end of the day, what we've put out there is, like you said, worth the little bit of money that we're asking in return for it. Do you have any irons in the fire? Any new books on the horizon? Yeah, actually, in April, I will have a new book out called Timeless. That will be my next romance. And hopefully another one early the next year that I'm starting to write this week. I don't know. Maybe we'll see. Hopefully starting to write this week.
So I hear that you have put down your pampered chef ways to become a writer full time.
I have. But that was one of those part-time jobs that I was working to make a little bit of money here and there. But my son has started kindergarten, mm-hmm. Too much sobbing on my end. He loves it. Mm-hmm. So this is a sort of a brave new world for me, where I said, if there's ever a time to do this full time, this is it. Mm-hmm. And I'm holding my breath and crossing my fingers and jumping in with both feet to say, this is how I'm going to make my money. This is how I'm going to make my career. It's writing. Mm-hmm. Instead of piecing a little bit of money here and there and everywhere, I'm going to try and make money writing. See if I can do my part for the family by using my craft.
Which is, being your true, awesome, authentic self. And I know that you listeners out there, that I can guarantee that Miss Rachel is going to continue to work hard to put out some very interesting and unique books, not the easy way, the hard way, even by the seat of her pants. So thank you so much for coming on the show, and I hope folks listening will rush to their computers or their local bookstore and pick them up some Rachel Spangler.
Oh, I hope so too. And thank you very much for having me, Liz.
It was my pleasure.